embarrassed. I'm outraged at the way that our government has handled this whole affair. They seem to have this love affair with China, and for the life of me, I have no idea why. Trudeau's very famously said he respects the Chinese dictatorship because of how quickly they can get things done. Well, that's not much of a standard. Slave labor can get a lot of things done. You know, when they built the Atlantic Wall in Germany during the Second World War to repel an Allied invasion on the French coast, the vast majority of that was done by slave labor. It was a huge, massive undertaking. And considering they had basic hand tools to work with, they accomplished a tremendous feat. But so what? You know, it's not like you turned your economic powerhouse loose and somebody else does the same thing and you come out on top being more productive and improve the lifestyle of your citizens better than the other guy did. It's not that kind of a competition. These people, they just have no regard for human life. Unless you're within that little cabal that runs the place. Obviously, this woman is the head of vice president of Huawei. She's one of China's most successful business people. So, you know, this should have been a no-brainer. We should have stood up as soon as it was announced Beijing and say, we're not going. Not until our two Michaels are home, and not until you start to take down those camps and free the Uyghurs. And when you start doing that, then we can have talks again. But until then, forget it. We are not going. But that's not the way things played out.
No, and you know, I can't help but make the observation, Nick. When I look at what we were talking about the last segment about the Middle East and demonstrations here in Canada, you know, one wonders what it is that possesses people to rush out of the street like madmen when it comes to protesting Israel and Israeli actions against people who are not Canadian. And again, I'm not for the sake of this segment, I'm not trying to draw any moral equivalencies or anything like that. I'm just saying that I just find it ironic that very few, if any, Canadians will go out and protest against China, certainly not in the thousands, let alone the hundreds or even the dozens, who are holding these two Canadians hostage. I mean, what is wrong with Canadians that they're more concerned for showing in vast numbers their displeasure with Jews who are hurting, I think justifiably so, but who are hurting people who are not Canadian on the other side of the world. But when it comes time to defending and supporting the freedom and the life of Canadians, Canadian citizens are completely AWOL. They're just not to be found anywhere. Now,
yeah, it's not like we don't know about it.
Is that fair of me to make that observation, or am I overdoing it?
I think so, because look, if you can't look after your own, what difference does it make how you feel about others? You know, your first priority as a citizen of a country is to the citizens of the country in which you reside or you hold allegiance to. It's like if you are traveling abroad and you see someone with a maple leaf on their backpack in trouble and you're a Canadian, I think you have a moral obligation to go over and render what assistance you can, not just leave them in the ditch or in trouble. And yet, too many Canadians do exactly that in a metaphorical sense, raging about the sins of Israel. And Israel's not perfect; they make mistakes. Nobody's arguing otherwise.
And nobody's more outspokenly critical of Israeli policies than Israelis are.
Well, yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. But when you hear some of the things, you never hear, well, in amongst these different protests, whether it be for Hamas or people like that. Well, we might not like Israel, but if you'd knock off the rockets, maybe not as many of you would get killed. Give us the chance to prove them wrong, that they won't stop. You stop, and if they don't, then we've got a legitimate piece of ground to stand on. Going over to China, when's the last time, other than a few people gathered in front of the Chinese embassy in downtown Ottawa, protesting this? It flares up once in a blue moon. The media will give it 15 minutes coverage, and then it's gone. Nobody seems to care. And yet we have real Canadians in real trouble, and I shouldn't say real Canadians in trouble, and nobody lifts a finger. I think it's a microcosm what's wrong with society at large, if you want to broaden the conversation out a little bit. But a lot of these people just don't seem to get it. Hamas is not somebody you want to end up in bed with, and you've got your brother, your cousin, somebody who shares a bond with you in trouble overseas in one of the most brutal dictatorships in the world. Now, and you don't even want to mention it?
Now, did I read a story in the last day or two? I'm pretty sure I did. I'll have to check this out. That the Chinese government had sent troops into one of the African countries on the premise that they, or on the pretext that they have to defend their economic interests that are potentially threatened. I'm not. I just glossed over it.
Was that Chad?
I don't know. It might have been. I don't recall the country, but I'm pretty sure I came across the story, and I should have paid more attention to it. So I apologize to our listeners. But that's that. If in fact that is the case, that's a pretty serious development. That a country like China could just arbitrarily send its troops into another sovereign country on the grounds that it's concerned that its economic interests, whether it's a bridge or a dam or an oil field that the Chinese government has financed, that it wants to defend or protect its assets. I'll have to follow that up, Nick. I don't recall for sure where it was or the exact circumstances. But
well, historically speaking, there's a name for that.
Invasion.
That's the word.
That's the
like
word.
If Germany in the Sudetenland sent it in there, sent the troops over the border into the Sudetenland, which I think at the time was part of Austria.
Czechoslovakia.
To defend its interests. Okay, Czechoslovakia.
Yep.
That's called an invasion, especially when you use your military to do it. So why is it not okay then, but it's okay now? Why is China given a free pass when the world went to war to prevent that very same thing 80 years ago?
Yeah, I don't know, and I'd have to verify the facts here. So, I want to be careful, but I think that in fact, if it's happened, and I'm quite confident to say that it has happened, although I don't know all of the circumstances behind it. But I think it's just another example of bad behavior by the Chinese government and Western governments giving them a pass, which again brings us full circle back to the Beijing having the Winter Olympics and whether or not we should be participating. A bigger question really ought to be, why was a country like China awarded the Olympics in the first place? And why would you give Beijing the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, when they just had the Summer Olympics one cycle ago? So there are so many questions that are surrounding this. But the bottom line for me is, Nick, whatever the rest of the world does, I think that we should be at the forefront as Canadians in an international push to boycott those Olympics. And if no other country boycotts the Winter Olympics in Beijing, we should still do it by virtue of the fact that the Chinese government has been holding these two Canadians hostage.
You and I are in complete agreement on that, Joseph. I just don't know what to say beyond that. It's outrageous, and it is certainly not something we should have anything to do with.
So you and I agree.
For once.
Well, we agree a lot, Nick. We agree a lot. But we haven't disagreed really yet this show. It's
not this evening.
I don't know what's going on.
We may disagree in the next segment.
I don't know. Look, I'll tell you what. Stay tuned. Let's for our listeners, you want to stay put for this segment if you're on the live show, if you're listening live, and if you're listening to the podcast, you're going to want to catch this next time tomorrow morning, because we are going to discuss the role of baby boomers in ruining everything for everybody. Did I put too fine a point on it, Nick? Okay.
We'll see.
Bottom of the hour. We got to go for a break. So we'll be back in a few minutes on the Nick and Joe Show on the Think Radio Broadcast Network.